Hello, I'm Tushar Upadhyay and you're watching IndiaTV. ISRO is all set to launch PSLV-C62 with the EOS N1 satellite. To talk about this in India's space future, we have with us Dr. S. Venkateswara Sharma, a veteran ISRO scientist. Welcome to IndiaTV, sir.
Thank you, Vishalji, and namaskar to a million viewers of India TV. I'm extremely happy to talk today regarding PSLV C62 EOS N1 mission, which is the first mission of year 2026 for ISRO and for this country. This is really going to be a great mission. And over the next few minutes, I will explain both the rockets and the satellite which are going to be launched from Sriharikota on 12th of January at about 10:12 a.m. As far as PSLV C62 rocket is concerned, it is the 64th PSLV launch vehicle and the 5th mission of the PSLV XL series, that is heavy lift vehicle series launch vehicle. And this PSLV C62 has 4 stages. The first stage, the first stage is the solid stage. The second stage is the liquid stage, third is the solid stage, and the fourth is the liquid stage. That is, the alternate of the solid and the liquid stages is what is this C62 rocket. And as far as the weight is concerned, this will be about 260 tons on liftoff, and it has a height of 44.4 meters. As far as the ignition and the trajectory is concerned, when the rocket is supposed to be lifted off, the first stage where the first stage engine, PS1 engine is there, which is S139 engine, along with PSOM XL2 boosters are there. Their combination of them is the first stage, and the first stage will ignite at T0. And the mission will take off, and at around 60-65 seconds, both the boosters will be separated and the mission will continue.
So, sir, what are the key technologies ISRO is testing in this mission?
That's about the first stage, ignition and takeoff at around 60 seconds, 60 to 70 seconds. The 2 boosters will be separated and the mission will continue with the core, that is the S139 engine, and the remaining 4 stages. At around 112 seconds, the first stage will be separated and the mission, the second stage ignition will start. And the crucial phase is that at around 140-150 seconds, that is nearing 3 minutes, the payload fairing separation happens. And the mission continues the same way. And for next 3 to 4 minutes, the second stage will carry the satellite into the required trajectory and the required orbit. And the separation of PS2 happens at around 400 seconds, 400 to 450 seconds, the separation happens, and the third stage, which is the liquid stage, which is the solid stage, will ignite and then take the rocket to a height of nearly 400 kilometers orbit, and the third stage will be separated at around 494 seconds, and the last stage will get ignited at around 500 seconds, and the satellite will be taken forward by the 4th stage liquid engine. So this how for about 10 to 12 minutes of the flight, the 4 stages of the rockets will operate.
Yes, sir.
This is how the launch happens, and the criticality of this mission is that this has that EOS N1 satellite, which is one of the most crucial satellites built by ISRO and the DRDO as a combined project, and this has been going for several years, and this has one of the most crucial requirement for both the strategic sector as well as for the civilian sector in terms of the Earth observation, mapping, and also specific observation of the strategic sector requirements, which are required by the payload built by the DRDO for the application by the strategic users. And this is one of the main activity of this satellite, and this satellite is about 600 kg, 550 to 600 kg at liftoff, depending upon how much fuel is loaded into the satellite. And this satellite is expected to function with a design life of 5 years, and generally the satellites are much longer living, but this satellite is being expected for a period which is for quite some time, that this satellite is being expected for specifically the strategic as well as the civilian application.
How will the EOS N1 satellite enhance India's surveillance and environmental capabilities?
Yeah, EOS N1 satellite is also called Anvesha satellite. This satellite is being built has been built jointly between ISRO and DRDO. The main bus system, what we call it as the control system, the power system, the guidance control system, the electronic systems, the sensors, actuators, those battery, solar system, all this bus system is built by ISRO, and the payload is built by the DRDO along with the private players over the past 4 to 5 years. And this venture of making the payload by DRDO and the bus system by ISRO, putting them together in ISRO bus system and testing them in ISRO facility in terms of the shock, vibration, environmental testing, and also to meet all the space requirements had been a challenge, and I think is one of the very good interaction, collaboration, and cooperation between the two organizations in the country to build a satellite of the class which is going to be professional in terms of usage for the strategy sector and also for the civilian application. As far as the specific applications are concerned, it is mainly for the surveillance related activities in terms of the mapping, in terms of looking at specific areas for the information, and also in terms of looking at the weather conditions of the places which are required to be monitored, in terms of specific other operations which are linked to the output of this satellite is going to be a crucial part for many other activities that are going to be handled by the strategy sector.
So moving on to our next question, what makes PSLV such a reliable launch vehicle after decades of service?
Yeah, it's an excellent question and a very good relevant question in terms of the Atmanirbharta also. If you had seen, the Honorable Prime Minister has announced that by 2047 India should be fully self-reliant and show what we call as Atmanirbharta achievement. And one of that sector is the space sector, in which the rockets and the satellites which are going to be made by this country shall be made, designed, developed, and produced by the Indian industry is one of the very important goal that the Prime Minister set for this country. Having said that, the PSLV-C62, which is the workhorse for ISRO for last nearly 2 decades, it has matured so much that it has launched the Gaganyaan, the Chandrayaan, and even the many other satellites, critical satellites which are required for scientific as well as experimental, and also the Earth observation satellites have been launched very, very successfully by this rocket. One thing what we must note is also that the C60, the PSLV technology, which has been designed, developed, manufactured, fabricated, tested, launched by ISRO successfully, now it has been handed over to the private agencies, HAL, L&T, Godrej, and many other private players are getting involved into this. And this particular vehicle now is completely being fabricated, tested, and flight tested and brought for the launch vehicle for launching from Sriharikota is something really a milestone achievement, I should say. And the repeated testing and the margins available in this rocket makes the rocket extremely reliable. In addition to this, we also have GSLV Mark II and also launch LVM2 vehicle. The GSLV vehicle can take 2,200 kg to GTO and up to 4,000 kg to low Earth orbit. And the LVM, what we had seen, the Bluebird launch, which took 6,500 kg into the low Earth orbit, and it can also take 4,400 kg to GTO. And other fourth type of vehicle, the SSLV, is also extremely important for India, which is another workhorse which is getting matured in ISRO launch vehicle campaign. And that will be launch on demand. Anytime you want to launch 300 to 400 kg into low Earth orbit, the rockets will be ready, is something which is going to make this country really Atmanirbharta achievement by 2047.
So as we can see, India is launching more satellites than ever before. How does this make our country stronger or safer?
extremely good question and very relevant question in the given situation that Honorable Prime Minister has declared that 2047 we should be Atmanirbharta, we should achieve. In that, the achievement of Atmanirbharta in space sector is also extremely important. Having said that, India has gone for complete liberalization of policy. The policy which has come into effect from 2021-22 on till now, it has completely made the industry ready. The type of making satellite. There are so many startups which have come up. There are more than 1,000 startups which are there in this sector, specifically 250 to 300 startups in the satellite sector itself. Therefore, the focus that the government of India, that is ISRO, should only make satellite and rockets it can be made by any competent private agency, and also the startups is something, the policy which is changed has really made this made way for many industries to come up, and there are more than 150 industries which are working for satellites. There are more than 200 to 220 companies which are working for rockets, and there are put together you can see nearly 350 to 400 industries which are which are ready and making satellite parts, and they are also making rocket and rocket parts, and all this types of thing is one part. Second part is the startups. You can see in this particular launch itself, there is Dhruva Aerospace, which is launching 5 satellites, and similarly there are many other startups in the country who are ready and making the satellites for satellite ready for launch. And also the most important thing is also that they are going to give services in the private terms. It is no more that government to government or government to private. It is private to private also. They are going to offer services for both government sector as well as the private sector, which is going to expand the scope of the applications which were limited only to ISRO to many industries across the country. So with this, I am sure that 2047 achieving an Atmanirbharta in satellite making, in terms of small satellites, in terms of the Earth observation satellites, in terms of the communication satellites, and also to provide services to the user community. I think we are in the right direction, and we are pushing towards that 2047 Atmanirbharta.
There's a lot of talk about India's human spaceflight program. When can Indians expect to see astronauts in space?
Extremely relevant at this point of time, from the point of view that ISRO is preparing to launch the first human flight to space, that is with the humanoids, and also we have to make 3 successful flights without astronauts. Then only we can fly astronauts. The first experiment probably is going to take up in 2026 first quarter is what has been declared by ISRO, and continuing with that, if ISRO is capable of ISRO of course is capable of launching the astronauts to space. We would have seen we had sent Subhanshu Shukla to have a complete experience of sending an astronaut to space through Axiom Space, and he spent successfully 14 days in International Space Station, and that experience carries a huge weightage. Having said that, if the launch happens in the first quarter of 2026, the first launch of the Gaganyaan without humanoid, another 2 launches have to happen before 2026. Then we will be completely prepared for launching of the astronauts in 2027. But I must tell you that the work is in very advanced stage of the progress, and the country in large, ISRO in particular, has worked more than 2 decades on this Gaganyaan project to master the launch vehicle, which is our Mark 3 launch vehicle, LVM 3, what we got as launch vehicle Mark 3, which can take 4,400 kg to GTO, and it can take up to 16,000 kg to the low Earth orbit, that is 400 kilometer orbit, where Gaganyaan mission has to happen. Astronauts have to be launched. That will be around 400 kilometer orbit. This launch vehicle is also completely prepared for the human rating. There is a difference between normal launch vehicle to human rating launch vehicle, and at any cost we should not lose the human life. That from that point of view, the mission has been ruggedized with more reliability, more more systems that is called as reliability systems added, more testing, and also there are many schemes for ensuring that the astronauts are brought back to Earth safely, even in case of any emergency, contingency, etc. To that extent, already in 2024 and 2024, ISRO has done two experiments, what we call as pad abort test, and also recovery experiments have been successfully done. Therefore, the launch vehicle is completely ready, as well as the crew module and the service module is concerned, where the astronauts have to be physically transported in the rocket to the space and they have to be brought back. Once the rocket launches it, rocket has no role. Only the crew module and service module will be there in the orbit, and that crew module, service module will act as the debooster and the returning rocket, what we call it as. The crew module, service module is also in advanced stage of development, testing, etc. And with the first flight happening in March 2026, I'm sure by 2027 we should have the Gaganyaan astronauts being launched into space.
So talking about private industry, how is ISRO involving private industry in the country's space ecosystem?
ISRO had been involving private industries right from the Aryabhatta time. ISRO started in 1972, Aryabhatta. That time, the great visionary Professor U.R. Rao decided that the satellite has to be done in Bangalore. Actually, ISRO, if you go see the history, it started in Tirunelveli, Tumba, equatorial launch vehicle. That's where it started. But in 1972, it was the satellite Aryabhatta was fabricated in India with the help of BEL. At that time, there were public sectors like BEL, BHEL, and NGEF type of HMT type of companies, which contributed for making the Aryabhatta. From that time on, ISRO in particular and satellite center in satellite center had been involving private industries, and handholding been happening. The successful story of the industry getting involved in space program is that they become it is not like vendor and supplier interaction. It is like a hand in hand type of interaction. They become partners with the Indian space program. So ISRO agrees and appreciates the difficulty in making the satellites or the rocket parts, and any difficulty faced by industries. It is not that it is their responsibility. ISRO also takes responsibility to handhold them to see that the problems are solved. Therefore, becoming partner with industry and doing it instead of customer and vendor relationship is something which has made this whole involvement of industry successful. Therefore, you can see more than 450 to 500 industries working for satellite as well as for the rockets. And also, there are more than 250, 300 startups which have come up with. Of course, again, you must know that I must say that these industries, the startups, are being supported by ISRO in terms of facilities, in terms of expertise, and also the seniors there who are superannuated have been taken there as advisors or as part of their knowledge system. Therefore, if you see both in terms of human resources, in terms of equipment resources, machinery resources, and the launch vehicle, ISRO is continuously supporting industries and the startups to create that ecosystem.
Sir, as the ISS nears retirement, what does it mean for the world if China's space station becomes the only permanent outpost in orbit?
Of course, this is one of the biggest topics which had been discussed in the spacefaring nations such as NASA, ISRO, ESA, JAXA, and Canadian Aerospace. How do we do and what do we do to when the ISS comes to its end? Another 2 to 3 years time, that is by 2030, ISS has to retire because already there are sufficient issues in terms of maintaining them because of the phasing out of many of the parts which have been used there, and non-availability of the replacement parts, and the aging of the materials, aging of the semiconductors parts, etc. It has to be necessarily be deorbited. Therefore, the question of having a space station to replace ISS is definitely on the cards. ISRO is also working on it. ISRO, in all probability, by 2035 should have BSS, what is called as Bharat Space Station, for which the activity is continuously going on. In addition to this, there is an international cooperation which is working, where Axiom Space USA is also a partner in development of the next replacement for ISS. Of course, for such an activity, international cooperation is definitely required, where India is also going to play a part. In summary, if I should tell you that the countries are working very hard, and it is not going to be that only there is one country which is having a space station, and there is definitely going to be a space station by the time ISS retires.
Are we moving closer to space becoming the next battlefield, with satellite and space stations as high value targets?
There are two major issues now, which is talked by spacefaring nations, as well as the major what we call it as the powers of the world. One is the amount of satellites which are there in the orbit, causing huge debris and huge cluster, especially in the low Earth orbit. There are tens and thousands of satellites which are colliding, and which are going to be an issue in terms of the utility of resources itself is going to be an issue. You would have also seen very recently that one of the Chinese rocket which was going to this space station got hit by a debris, and the mission has to be aborted, and they had to operate contingency measures to bring the astronaut back to space. So this is one of the biggest challenges that is being faced, and that itself can be sort of warfare type of situation, where any country is trying to non-friendly country is trying to launch a rocket or something like that. One of these satellites itself can be a sort of a missile to shoot down those very expensive, very involved missions. A small rocket itself can be working as a missile. That's another one danger which is being looked at. Other one is that as far as the warfare is concerned, definitely whether the war happens in space or war happens in ground or wherever happens, the space assets is going to play a major role. Even today's situation, any war, the link between any of these vehicles or any of the flying objects, it is through space only. And also the radar imaging satellites and imaging satellites, the location satellites, and navigation satellites, they are all contributing for the strategic sector. Therefore, indirectly, we are into the war controlled by the space in terms of the applications of navigation satellites, Earth observation, and pointing satellites, etc. Specifically, if you ask me about is there going to be any war in the space, it is not really likely in that sense that it's going to be Star Wars type of thing. But
exactly.
Space asset.
It's all in the movies right now.
Yes, it's all in the movie.
Practically possible. That's what I asked.
Yes, practically it is going to be something that the entire war is controlled by the space, from the space assets. And if the space asset itself is disturbed as part of war, if ever you are able to destroy some of the satellites in the orbit, that itself becomes space war, and that is more likely, and it is more dependence on the space assets for many of our applications in terms of navigation, etc., is a challenge which every country is going to face.
Coming back to India, so what I want to ask is, where do you see India in the global space order by 2030?
2035 or 2040 is something which is realizable, and really that India, once achieves the Bharat space station in 2035 and also lands an astronaut on the moon and does the Venus mission and also does the Jupiter mission, then really the country is going to be really in a totally different orbit. Of course, what India has done today is also not less than any other country, and what we have done is much different and much better than some of the other countries which have the so-called the developed countries and advanced countries, and the type of budget they have. The country, what it has achieved in terms of Chandrayaan, in terms of Mangalyaan, in terms of Suryayaan, is really something really marvelous which has been achieved. But by 2035 and 2040, the country should be definitely moving towards Atmanirbharta, is what I think. And by 2030, I'm sure Yeah,
Yes.
by 2030, I'm sure that the country would have definitely moved towards the self-sufficiency in the low Earth orbits of monitoring and strategic satellites, etc. I am expecting that at least 75 to 100 satellites to be launched, which are specifically required for the country's strategic sector as well as civilian and industry sector. Once happens, the country is comfortable in terms of many users and application requirements.
So, looking back on your career, what milestone at ISRO are you most proud of?
Every milestone is we are very proud. If you see, when we launched into 1972 to 1975, Aryabhatta, in 3 years, the country made a satellite in Pina sheds, which is like a startup with only 100 engineers, which were fresh, and we made a satellite and launched, and we have completed 50 years after Aryabhatta today, which is one of the biggest milestones. Even today in the world, there are many startups. No startup has made a satellite. Even today's scenario, where the available information, availability of resources is so high, no country has startup is able to make a satellite of 340 kg of Aryabhatta class. That is one of the biggest achievement that the country is proud of. This one. Second thing is, of course, the Chandrayaan 1, 2008, we launched Chandrayaan 1, and even though many countries had landed on the moon before the NASA had landed, 3 decades before that on the moon, astronauts they were landed, but we were the first country to find water on the moon on 2008, 2009 by Chandrayaan 1. Then came 2014, where the Mars orbiter mission. If you see Mars orbiter mission also, before that, America had tried 3-4 times and they were successful later. And Russia had also tried 2-3 times. They were successful only 4 times. But we were the first country to make the satellite in 12 months, and we were successful for the first time in the orbit. And we could do it only in 400 to 450 crores. Even the Bollywood cinema cannot be made at 8 rupees per kilometer. Expenses 8 rupees per kilometer. We had to travel 55 kilometers from Earth to Mars, and we spent only 8 rupees per kilometer to travel 55 lakh kilometer at 40,000 kilometer speed. One of the biggest achievement. Even the world is looking at how this country is able to make. And now landing on in 2024, August 21st, we landed on the South Pole, and no other country had ever attempted to land on South Pole. It's extremely difficult condition to land on South Pole, where the boulders are there. The weather condition is extremely bad. There are only 14 days of light and 14 days of darkness. It is like our 24 hours. That is 14 days night and 14 days light. So extremely difficult conditions. So we landed there in South Pole successfully with a textbook precision, and even now the Chandrayaan 3 is working successfully. We did Suryayaan, that is Aditya L1 mission, and we went up to 15 lakh kilometer orbit, and we have completely given. Today, Aditya L1 is one of the milestone satellites in the study of the sun, the coronal mass ejection, etc. And extremely good information for next 20 years. The researchers can do research on the data what has been collected by Aditya L1. Therefore, if you see every milestone what we have achieved is something we can't say that one against other. Each one is extremely important, and the milestone continues. These are only those which we have listed, but there are every mission which is going to be for strategic sector or communication sector, Earth observation satellite. Those are also something which we need to be really, really proud of.
Moving on to our last question, sir. What advice would you give young Indians aspiring to work in space research?
What is required to be successful is, we want only the good citizens of this country. Anybody who is a good citizen is required for the strategic activity. In one of those strategic activities, the space sector. Space is not the only sector. There are many other sectors which really needs the citizens, which are only citizens, good citizens are required. Having said that, it is not that whether science or maths or physics, chemistry, commerce, or arts, which subject we have to study is something which children keep asking. I would say that any subject you study, we need them. If you don't study also, we need them. If you see space sector itself, you need from a technician to engineers, high level engineers. We also need administrative staff. We also need housekeeping staff. We also need, all level people for space sector. Entire gamut is the space sector. It is not just that few space engineers or space sector. Every person who contributes in this organization is part of the space sector. Be it accounts, be it admin, be it purchase, be it stores, be it housekeeping, be it media, be it management. Everybody is required. Therefore, my sincere advice to these children is that whatever the children are doing, they should do it sincerely, honestly, honest to the core, and they should follow their passion. And whatever studies they do, they should definitely necessarily do it without any compromise. But they should follow up their passion, and they should necessarily take up something which they're passionate. It is not that everybody should become engineers, everybody should become doctors. It's not like that. Any subject you take, you must excel in that, and you can necessarily come out. And no more it is engineers and doctors. You can see there are many artists who are coming up. Of course, they are required for space also, and there are many other sectors. Now AI is picking up, ML is picking up, artificial intelligence, machine learning is picking up. To that itself, there are many other tangential fields like environmental studies, art, media study, and even many other related activities which are equally important other than engineers and doctors. Every good citizen who has excelled in his field is important for this country, for ISRO, for even other similar strategic and private as well as other industries.
So thank you, Dr. Sharma, for sharing your insights. With the upcoming missions, India continues to make its mark in space exploration. Wishing ISRO.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice speaking to you all. All the best. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Jai Hind, sir.